السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Today I'm teaching the Jinnat live, inshallah, since no live human beings are here in the lesson. Ibn Hajar rahimahullah says, أو تنتهي غاية الإسناد إلى الصحابي كذلك، أي مثل ما تقدم في كون اللفظ يقتضي التصريح بأن المنقول هو من قول الصحابي أو من فعله أو من تقريره، ولا يجيء فيه جميع ما تقدم بل معظمه، والتشبيه لا تشترط فيه المساواة من كل جهة. ولما كان هذا المختصر شاملا لجميع أنواع علوم الحديث استطردت منه إلى تعريف الصحابي ما هو، فقلت وهو من لقي النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم مؤمنا به ومات على الإسلام ولو تخللت ردة في الأصح، والمراد باللقاء ما هو أعم من المجالسة والمماشاة ووصول أحدهما إلى الآخر وإن لم يكلمه، ويدخل فيه رؤية أحدهما الآخر سواء كان ذلك بنفسه أم بغيره. والتعبير باللقي أولى من قول بعضهم الصحابي من رأى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم، لأنه يخرج ابن أم مكتوم ونحوه من العميان وهم صحابة بلا تردد. واللقي في هذا التعريف كالجنس، وقولي مؤمنا به كالفصل يخرج من حصل له اللقاء المذكور لكن في حال كونه كافرا. So since we have minimal amount of lessons left, you can see all of you are also tired now, so we'll have to try to complete as soon as possible, and therefore we're going to have to speed up and try to at least complete until there today. Otherwise we would have just maybe taken this first paragraph. Nevertheless, Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah explains that a chain could stop at a Sahabi and it does not reach up to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He will later explain that such a narration would be classified as mawquf. So he says, أو تنتهي غاية الإسناد. غاية الإسناد means the origin of the chain. Depending on which way you want to look at it, the ghaya, intihā al-ghaya, the end, or you want to call it the beginning, the start, the origin, irrespective. So you want to say this, the chain starts from there, because the person he now narrates it from the Ṣahābi, and then someone narrates from him, and someone narrates from him. So the beginning of the chain, or you want to call it the termination of the chain, looking at it from the other angle. So whether you just touch your nose by putting your hand on your nose, or whether you put your hand all the way around and then touch your nose, in the same way, whatever the touching of your nose has been attained. So in the same way, yeah, irrespective of how you want to call it, but basically where the sanad reaches up to ila Ṣahābi, so it reaches up to the Ṣahābi. This refers to any companion, irrespective of his age, status, or the amount of time that he spent in the noble companionship of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. كذلك. So now what's the meaning of كذلك? أي مثل ما تقدم في كون اللفظ يقتضي التصريح بأن المقول هو من قول الصحابي أو من فعله أو من تقريره. So so here the word, it's either in some copies it comes as maqul, and in some copies it comes as manqul. Yeah, Sheikh Nuruddin Itr put it as manqul. So he's saying that if it will have all the similar quality, most of the similar qualities as marfu'. For example, how marfu' was divided into the tasrihi and hukmi, and then it was divided into qawli, fa'li, and taqriri. The same would apply here. But now Ibn Hajar clarifies and he says, وَلَا يَجِيءُ فِيهِ جَمِيعُ مَا تَقَدَّمَ بَلْ مُعْظَمُهُ. It does not resemble marfu' in every way. Rather, in most of the ways, it resembles marfu'. وَالتَّشْبِيه لَا تُشْتَرَطُ فِيهِ الْمُسَاوَاةُ مِنْ كُلِّ جِهَةٍ. So this here is دخل, you remember from Nur al-Anwar, تفتق المقدر. So this here is like a response that, okay, if it's not the same in all the ways, then how are you making tashbih? So he explains وَالتَّشْبِيهُ لَا تُشْتَرَطُ فِيهِ الْمُسَاوَاةُ مِنْ كُلِّ جِهَةٍ, that when you are comparing one thing to another thing and seeing how similar they are, then it's not necessary that the similarity has to be in each and every way. So mawquf will also be divided into sarih and hukmi, as we said, and it's also divided into qawli, fa'ali, and taqriri. But we read above that there are many additional words which a Sahabi can use to indicate that the words which he is mentioning are actually marfu'. So for example, he can say min as-sunnah, or he can say kunna naf'alu. So if he says kunna naf'alu, it means that this is marfu'. These types of scenarios would not apply to a tabi'i. So if a tabi'i has to say kunna naf'alu, then it does not mean that it will be mawquf. So you can see in this way here it is differing. So in short, there is umum wa khusus between mawquf and marfu'. And in balagha, you learned that there is no problem in equating something to another if there is similarity only in some qualities. It is not conditional that two things have to be exactly the same, then only tashbih can be made. Hence you can say Zaydun kal Asad, or you can even say Zaydun Asadun. Zayd is a lion. It does not mean that he roars like a lion, or he has the qualities, he has whiskers like a lion, etc. It's just that in terms of his might, he is like a lion. So تشبيه الشيء بالشيء لا يلزم منه مساواته له في كل جهة. Now here Ibn Hajar rahmallah wants to explain who a Sahabi is, but before doing that he gives the reasoning, and he tells you why he's going to explain what a Sahabi is, who is a Sahabi. And in some manuscripts it comes as a Sahabi man huwa, and in some it comes a Sahabi ma huwa. So he says ولما so again here now in some manuscripts after the word lamma the word an comes, and in some it doesn't come with the word an. ولما كان هذا المختصر شاملا لجميع أنواع علوم الحديث استطردت منه إلى تعريف الصحابي ما هو فقلت. So he's giving his excuse on why he's going to be explaining to you who a Sahabi is. And he says that since the small treatise of his, it encompasses all the different types of ulumul hadith. Istadratu, you will deviate a little and explain to you who a Sahabi is. Now here, we use the word istadratu, so I translated it as deviate. Why did I do that? Because Alam al-Laqani rahmallah said, اعلم أن الاستطراد عند قوم ذكر الشيء في غير موضعه لمناسبة. The meaning of istitrad is where you're mentioning something just in passing. So you're mentioning something not in its place, but because of some munasaba, because of some reason. So based on that, Mullah al-Qari rahmallah said, قيل هذه العبارة غير ظاهرة المعنى. That this meaning of the statement here of Ibn Hajar, it does not actually, the meaning of it is not very apparent. والأحسن أن يقول بدلها. It would have been better for Ibn Hajar rahmallah rather to just say أوردت تعريف الصحابي بالاستطراد. Doesn't have to mention it like that. استطردت منه إلى تعريف الصحابي ما هو. Rather should just say أوردت تعريف الصحابي بالاستطراد. I'm mentioning the who is Sahabi, the definition of a Sahabi in passing. So then Alama al-Qani rahimahullah objects في كون تعريف الصحابي والبحث عن حقيقته من الاستطراد الذي عرفه به نظر، وأي مانع من كونه من مباحث علم الحديث. كيف؟ ومن فوائد معرفة الصحابي تمييز المرسل من غيره والحكم له بالعدالة حتى يتحقق القادح، فإن الصحابة محكوم لهم بالعدالة مطلقا. He's saying, now why would Ibn Hajar rahmallah have to mention all this here in passing? Rather, it's actually one of the very important things of ulum al-hadith to know who a Sahabi is. So he's saying, how is that? Why? Because there are two great benefits what that you get from knowing that a person qualifies as a Sahabi. The first is tamyizul mursal min ghayrihi. If this person has to now narrate directly from the Prophet ﷺ and is making irsal, we done the meaning of irsal, that is leaving out the intermediary. The narrator is not mentioning his name and is quoting it directly from the Prophet ﷺ. Then we know that marasil sahaba maqbula, so that mursal narration will be automatically and by default accepted. That's the first benefit. And the second benefit is that فَإِنَّ الصَّحَابَ مَحْكُومٌ لَهُمْ بِالْعَدَالَةِ مُطْلَقَةً. That Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they are all regarded as adil. So by knowing that a particular person is a Sahabi, we know that now we do not have to spend much time analyzing his status and inspecting his background and trying to determine his status, because we can understand that he is adil. And therefore, we just need to then look at the matan of that narration. Nevertheless, Ibn Hajar rahimahullah presents his definition, and thereafter he goes on to explain each word of his definition and to show how his definition is jami' and mani', how his definition is encompassing, and yet he did not leave out any crucial point. So he says, who is a Sahabi? هو من لقي النبي صلى الله تعالى عليه وآله وسلم. So the word ta'ala in alihi, in some manuscripts, مؤمنا به ومات على الإسلام ولو تخللت ردة في الأصح. So this is the definition which he gives, and this is what you should memorize. A Sahabi is that person who meets the Prophet ﷺ. He's going to explain to you his choice of words. Who meets the Prophet ﷺ in such a condition that he was a Muslim. وَمَاتَ عَلَى الْإِسْلَامِ, and thereafter he passed away on Islam. Even though in the middle, if he became an apostate for a short period of time. So he came to the Prophet ﷺ, he met the Prophet ﷺ being a mu'min. That means he qualifies as a Sahabi. But then at the time when Abu Bakr radiallahu after the Prophet ﷺ passed away, maybe he now said that he's no more going to give zakah and he turned apostate. So now he's no more a Muslim and he's still alive. Thereafter, he got the tawfiq and hidayah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he became a Muslim again. And he passed away as a Muslim. And names will be given when we come under these words which Ibn Hajar scrutinizes. Then we'll give you the names of those like that. So even they will be considered as a Sahaba. So this is the technical meaning of a Sahabi. وَأَمَّا لُغَةً فَهُوَ مَنْ صَحِبَ غَيْرَهُ مُدَّةً وَلَوْ قَلَّتْ. What's the meaning of a Sahabi? Lughatan, the literal meaning? It's basically just a companion. So a person who stays in a company of another person for a period of time, even though it is very short. You go sit with another person for 2 or 3 minutes, and you can consider yourself that you were in his company. Now, from the literal meaning, we understand that even if it is for a very short while, then too he will be considered as a Sahabi. Ibn Hajar rahimahullah derives this definition from Imam Bukhari rahimahullah. Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, he mentioned in the heading of the chapter on the virtues of the Sahaba, that Babu Fadaili Ashabi Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam wa man sahiba Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam aw ra'ahu min al-muslimin fahuwa min ashabihi. So you can see that he's saying that that person who came into the companionship of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or he saw the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then he would be considered as a Sahabi. So as you notice now in this definition which Imam Bukhari rahmallah gave here, and in the definition of Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, they did not put the condition of bulugh or even tamyiz. So the question then comes about as to the ruling of those who are still babies. Would they be considered, they were babies when the Prophet ﷺ passed away? So Ibn Hajar rahimahullah in Fath al-Bari, then he explains here هل يشترط في الرأي أن يكون بحيث يميز ما رآه أو يكتفي بمجرد حصول الرؤية محل نظر وعمل من صنف في الصحابة يدل على الثاني. He's saying that those who wrote, who gathered the names of Sahaba. So you know there are many books. Ibn Hajar rahimahullah himself wrote Al-Isaba. Besides that, you have Usul al-Ghaba, Isti'ab, many books which are written which gathered the names of the Sahaba. So those who gathered the names of the Sahaba, they included the names of those who were babies when the Prophet ﷺ passed away. That means that they considered them to also be regarded as Sahaba. And therefore, if you see a Sahabi like that, then or a person like that, then you do not have to inspect his integrity. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that if he has to narrate any mursal narration, then it will be accepted. So to give you an example, if you look at Muhammad ibn Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, he was born 3 months before the Prophet ﷺ passed away. So that means that he was 3 months old when the Prophet ﷺ passed away, because his mother, Asma bint Umays, gave birth to him in Hajjatul Wida. And that was in the end of the Qa'dah in the 10th year of Hijrah. And yet, if he has to narrate directly from the Prophet ﷺ, then it's definite that whatever he's narrating is mursal. And majority, all the ulama would accept it. There's only, you remember under the chapter of mursal we done about Abu Ishaq as-Fira'ini. He was like the only one who rejected the marasil of Sahaba. But everybody else except his mursal narrations. And then, so this is the definition which Ibn Hajar rahmallah gave, and this is according to his view. There are other views again, and based on that, the definition will then have to be altered. For example, Sheikh Khudair, he says in Tahqiq al-Rakhbah, لا يعد صحابيا إلا من وصف بأحد أوصاف أربعة. The person will only be regarded as a Sahabi if he has one of 4 qualities. من طالت مجالسته. That he has to sit in a company of the Prophet ﷺ for a lengthy period of time. This year, you can see that from the way Imam Bukhari rahmallah mentioned it, and also from the literal meaning. So therefore, in Fath al-Bari, Ibn Hajar rahmallah said that يعني أن اسم صحبة النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم مستحق لمن صحبه أقل ما يطلق عليه اسم صحبة لغة، وإن كان العرف يخص ذلك ببعض الملازمة، ويطلق أيضا على من رآه رؤية ولو على بعد، وهذا الذي ذكره البخاري هو الراجح. So that is what he's saying. That's saying that from the definition which Imam Bukhari rahimahullah gave, you can deduce that even if a person had to come for a very short period of time in the companionship of the Prophet ﷺ, then he would be considered as a Sahabi. But there are these other scholars, they are saying man talat majalasatuhu, that a Sahabi is that person who's sat in the company of the Prophet ﷺ for a lengthy period of time. أو حفظت روايته, or he narrated a hadith and his narrations have been documented and preserved. أو ضبط أنه غزا معه, or they saying no, a condition to be a Sahabi is that you have to at least go on one expedition with the Prophet ﷺ. أو استشهد بين يديه. So you can see that these are kind of conditions which others have put. واشترط بعضهم في صحة الصحبة بلوغ حلمه. That some have said that no, only if a person had to be baligh, then only he would be considered as a Sahaba. So that means he had to meet Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam whilst he was baligh. So according to these scholars, it would be wrong for others to include Muhammad ibn Abu Bakr as-Siddiq and all those other Sahaba under the books which discuss Sahaba, because they do not qualify as Sahaba. Imam Nawawi rahimahullah explains other views as well. and he says that this view here, which Ibn Hajar mentioned, is saying that huwa madhabu Ahmad ibn Hanbal wa bi Abdullah al-Bukhari wal muhaddithin kaffa. He's saying that this here is the view of all the muhaddithin. وذهب أكثر أصحاب الفقه والأصول إلى أنه من طالت صحبته له صلى الله عليه وسلم. He's saying that the vast majority of fuqaha and usuliyin, they are of the view that a Ṣahābi is that person who spent a lengthy period in the company of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So even though they acknowledge the literal meaning, they are not content with a brief meeting. So for example, he quotes Allama Baqillani as saying, لا خلاف بين أهل اللغة أن الصحابي مشتق من الصحبة جار على كل من صحب غيره قليلا كان أو كثيرا يقال صحبه شهرا ويوما وساعة. So this is according to لغة, وهذا يوجب في حكم اللغة إجراء هذا على من صحب النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ولو ساعة. هذا هو الأصل. So he's saying, acknowledging that if you're looking at it from the literal point of view, that then any Ṣahābi will only be a Ṣahābi even if he came just for a very short period in the company of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But after that, what he says, وَمَعَ هَذَا فَقَدْ تَقَرَّرَ لِلْأُمَّةِ عُرْفٌ بِأَنَّهُمْ لَا يَسْتَعْمِلُونَهُ إِلَّا فِي مَنْ كَثُرَتْ صُحْبَتُهُ واتصل لقاؤه ولا يجري ذلك على من لقي المرء ساعة ومشى معه خطوات وسمع منه حديثا فوجب أن لا يجري في الاستعمال إلا على من هذا حاله. So this is what Allama Baqillani is saying. He's saying that you have the lughi meaning and then you have the meaning which is urfi, which everybody uses. So according to urf, a companion, when you talk about a companion, it is a person who spends a little while in the companionship of a person, not as a person who takes a few steps with you, a person who meets you for a few seconds. No, rather that person who spends a little bit time with you. So Imam Nawawi rahmallah then comments on this and he says, هذا كلام القاضي المجمع على أمانته وجلالته وفيه تقرير للمذهبين ويستدل به على ترجيح مذهب المحدثين فإن هذا الإمام قد نقل عن أهل اللغة أن الاسم يتناول الصحبة ساعة وأكثر أهل الحديث قد نقلوا الاستعمال في الشرع والعرف على وفق اللغة فوجب المصير والله أعلم. In Fath al-Bari, Ibn Hajar rahimahullah explained the views with examples. So he said, ومنهم من بالغ فكان لا يعد في الصحابة إلا من صاحب الصحبة العرفية. Only that person who spends what according to urf is considered as companionship. So if a person just took a few steps with a person, then you won't consider him as a companionship. So now he says, كما جاء عن عاصم الأحول قال رأى عبد الله بن سرجس رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم غير أنه لم يكن له صحبة. So he says that أخرجه أحمد, that Abdullah ibn Sarjis, he saw the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but he would not be regarded as a Ṣahābi. And this here is narrated by Imam Ahmad rahmallah. So Ibn Hajar rahmallah said, هذا مع كون عاصم قد روى عن Abdullah ibn Sarjis هذا عدة أحاديث. He's saying that this very same person, Asim al-Ahwal, who is narrating this here and saying, Abdullah ibn Sarjis Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam غير أنه لم يكن له صحبة, the very same person, he narrated a few narrations from the same Abdullah ibn Sarjis from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he's saying that this narrations you can find it in Sahih Muslim and in Sunan Abu Dawud, Sunan Tirmidhi, Sunan Nasa'i, Sunan Ibn Majah. فأكثرها من رواية عاصم عنه. So he gives one example that أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم استغفر له. So this here is just the opinion of Asim, that a Ṣahābi will only be that person who spends some time according to urf. According to urf, then only he will be considered as a Ṣahābi. وكذا روي عن سعيد بن المسيب أنه كان لا يعد في الصحابة إلا من أقام مع النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم سنة فصاعدا. Sa'id ibn Musayyab, he is saying that even if a person, for a person to be considered as a Sahabi, it's conditional that he should at least spend 1 full year in the companionship of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. أو غزا معه غزوة فصاعدا, or he should at least go on one expedition with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Ibn Hajar rahimahullah says, وَالْعَمَلُ عَلَى خِلَافِ هَذَا الْقَوْلِ, that the amal of muhaddithin is in contrast to this here, and even of authors who wrote on the Sahaba, لأنهم اتفقوا على عد جمع في الصحابة لم يجتمعوا بالنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم إلا في حجة الوداع. That so many people came into the companionship of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam just in the Hajjatul Wada'. So obviously, entire year did not pass. Yet muhaddithun would regard them as muhaddithun would still regard them as companions and as Sahaba. ومن اشترط الصحبة العرفية أخرج من له رؤية أو من اجتمع به لكن فارقه عن قرب كما جاء عن أنس أنه قيل له هل بقي من أصحاب النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم غيره. That Anas radiallahu anhu was asked, is there any other person remaining from the companions of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم? So he said لا. He said no. مع أنه كان في ذلك الوقت عدد كثير ممن لقيهم من الأعراب. So many of the Bedouins who came and saw the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they were still alive. Yet Anas radiallahu anhu responded and said, no, there is no other Sahabi. So from this here, it's derived that if a person did not spend a sufficient time in the company of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then he will not be considered as a Sahabi. ومنهم من اشترط في ذلك أن يكون حين اجتماعه به بالغا. And there are those who said no, that the person has to be baligh. So Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he says وهو مردود أيضا. This year it's also مردود. لأنه يخرج مثل هذا الحسن بن علي ونحوه. Because then Hasan ibn Ali would not be considered as a Sahabi. ونحوه من أحداث الصحابة. He says والذي جزم به البخاري هو قول أحمد والجمهور من المحدثين وقول البخاري من المسلمين كيد يخرج من صحبه أو من رآه من الكفار. Basically, Ibn Hajar rahimahullah is this definition which he is giving is just elaborating and expounding on what Imam Bukhari rahimahullah has mentioned, because he's mentioning that that's the view of the vast majority of muhaddithin. Ibn Hajar rahimahullah now decodes this for us and explains each word, but he did not unravel the first word, and that is the word man. So the word man comes for umum. The first thing that is intended here is that it includes all human beings. So irrespective of background, ethnicity, which country the person came from, or even gender. Al-Malaqani rahmallah, he says, لفظ من يدخل فيه الذكور والإناث, that males and females, whoever came into the company of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they would be considered as a Sahabi. If there's a female, she will be considered as a Sahabiyya. وهو كذلك. So now the objection comes about that Ibn Hajar in his definition, he said وهو. So the Al-Malaqani responds to that and he says وهو أي الشخص الصحابي فلا يكون تذكير الضمائر والأوصاف مخرجا للأنثى. When you are mentioning a مذكر صيغة or a masculine pronoun, then it does not exclude females. فلا تكن من الغافلين. So don't try to act like a feminist and say that, look here, they're only looking at the Sahabas. He said, they're only giving males this privilege. He said, فلا تكن من الغافلين. So that was the first thing, the word man. The second thing is, Al-Malaqani said, إذا كان لفظ من مدلوله من يعقل تناول تعريف الإنس والجن, then it will refer to human beings and to jinnat. So inshallah, we will discuss about this year about jinnat in the next lesson. Until then, jazakumullahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.